And welcome everybody to HOU.SEC.CAST, the HOU.SEC.CON podcast. As usual, here with my co-host and best friend in the world, Sam Van Ryder.
I feel good about that, man. Feelings mutual.
So we've got a really cool guest. Like I said, we always do, but I'm very excited about this one. I'm sorry for all the Longhorns in the audience, but we do have a professor from Texas A&M, Dr. Marcus Botacin. But he does good stuff. He talks about cool stuff. We're going to be talking about his talk, which is fully automated AI generated malware, kind of what the risks are, what he sees. Really good talk at the conference. Super smart dude. A lot of people helping him do research. This is going to be a cool session.
It is. And so really looking forward to it. And when we're talking cutting edge AI and different concepts, it's so evolving so quickly. It's really hard to keep up with everything.
It is. In short, protect your LLMs. Protect them. All right, let's jump over, man.
Let's go.
Sam, I'm always excited to have guests on, but when we've got people from the state of Texas, which sometimes we have a lot of people from the state of Texas because of who we are, we're in Houston, but we're starting to get all these national folks, but now we got somebody from A&M. I'm excited about that. And I'm also a little worried for any of our viewers that are Longhorns. They may skip this episode. What do you think?
No, well, I hopefully they'll take it as a call to action to start, participating as well. We get quite a few people from A&M and University of Houston, and other universities around town, Houston Christian. So hopefully the UT folks will step it up and start submitting papers and for our conference and show up.
I think that's a good way. I think that's a good way of looking at it. What do you think, Marcus?
Yeah, it's pretty good. So howdy, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And go Aggies.
Oh, okay. Starting it quick. Okay. Well, Marcus, Dr. Marcus Botacin, thank you very much, professor over at Texas A&M in the computer science department. Really appreciated you coming out and speaking at HOU.SEC.CON this year. I watched, Sam and I talk about this just about everyone. We don't get to see the presentations most of the time during the conference itself. So we get the pleasure of going back and watching them. Very informative talk. I really appreciate you coming out and speaking on that topic around creating malware using LLMs. Very interesting concept. So thank you for coming up.
Yeah, my pleasure once again.
So Marcus, I thought this one might be interesting for you, given your talk. So there was a recent, I think it was by by North Carolina State, the North Carolina State, and then their electrical and computer engineering group, where they're doing a side channel attack to try to get off of chips that are running LLM models and they've been able to be very, very accurate, and like over 99% accurate, almost 100% accuracy, to essentially steal what that LLM is off of that chip without really having a whole lot of knowledge of what that is. It's not a novel attack. It takes a lot of horsepower and stuff to get it done. But I just thought it was really interesting giving your talk on creating malware using LLMs. If somebody had the ability to go steal a model off of a chip through a side channel attack like that and not having to directly hit it and be that accurate, I thought it was pretty interesting. So that's what this whole article is about. It's called TPU extract, and the attackers can steal organizations' AI models. Wanted to see what you thought about that, about the article.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting article. It's interesting that you brought this topic, because something that I try to do as a research is to try to the problems via other lenses. So something people are trying to do right now is to discover how to train models, how to make it better and larger and more efficient and other things. And I try to step a little bit out and see, okay, what else do you have? So one of the things is my talk about, of course, how to create malware, how to abuse these LLMs and this type of things. And another way that we can look to this problem is about, okay, someone might put a lot of effort in training a model and creating your ML model, AI model, and then someone, if not protected properly, might go there and simply steal your model and steal totally your effort, your resources that you put over there, your competitive advantages. And then something that is really important is try to protect these kind of things. So as you mentioned, sometimes these protections are not in place. Sometimes the techniques are not new by itself, but its application to this new domain of machine learning models are somehow new, because sometimes people working on this domain are experts in machine learning, but they never or have barely wondered about security implications of that. So this is something important to shed light on it. And by lucky, I just published a paper on that with some co-authors from Florida International University and us from Texas A&M, exactly about that. It's a complete survey on how to extract machine learning models from applications in general, in the style, all that you need to know about protecting and extracting your model. So I'll leave the link for you in the comments so everyone listening to us right now can check. And it's very interesting because many of the techniques that we use in malware, or we are trying to disarm or the malware because they are trying to protect against evasion, are the same techniques that we can employ against model extraction. So the same way that malware tries to pack the code and to obfuscate the code and try to make the code only available at runtime and not statically, we can employ the same techniques to protect the models. So instead of putting these models plainly available, readily available at the hardware or at the APK of an IoT device or something else, we can try to make it harder against distraction, of course, by obfuscating this model, by splitting this model, modularizing this model, make it available in runtime, or making components depending on external commands from, in the case of malware, command and control, in the case of AI, on the server of the company providing this. So it's a very interesting arms race. And here it's a very interesting example of how we can use like malware techniques, so far used for attacking, from a very much more interesting purpose that is defending. The same techniques can be used in both domains. It's something very, very interesting. And I'm happy about this news because it's someone else shedding light to this problem.
Yep. Well, it's a good thing with universities doing the research similar to what you're doing, because they do talk about obfuscating, uh, basically introducing noise in the EM signal that's coming out by putting some kind of interference process, putting dummy operations in there, something like that, to do some of that obfuscation. So you couldn't pick it up. So I thought that was an interesting combative or way to combat that problem.
Well, I don't want to be. I guess I'll be a little bit of a negative Nelly on this one, right? Getting it done is not easy. Like the proximity you have to be to that, and I think about like if anything you're going to hack, you want to know what your target is, and there's a lot of things you need to understand from that. So the methods they used here, from the equipment to the proximity of where you need to be in order to execute then I mean, I think the risk is super low. I mean, it's interesting. Don't get me wrong, but the risk is super, super low for something like this to happen. You'd have to have a whole lot of information before you could even execute on that, plus a lot of resources.
I'll be a negative Nelly the other way, and somewhat. I don't think the risk is very low, and they even talk about it in the article. So I think companies that are trying to get this kind of information, are countries that are trying to get this information, are attackers, groups that are funded by or state funded, can put the resources in to get. I'm not saying it's easy to do by any means. I agree with you there. I just think the more that you want a particular LLM model, and it's something that would be great for your country or your company to have or whatever, I think they do have the resources to put in it. So I don't think it's beyond the reach of them. I don't think you're going to see a lot of individual hackers though trying to grab this. I mean,
But like with
I
any
100%
IP,
agree.
that's critical to your business, you've got to put the measures in place to protect it.
Absolutely.
That's core to the business. So,
Yep.
in that regard, I'm just saying that, I think we've learned over the past decade and plus of, leakage of IP, if you will. I'm doing the air quotes here, right? The leakage of IP into other, I'll say, competitive countries and whatnot. There is, I think there's awareness there, right? But anyway, yeah, it's the method that's in my mind, it says, look, this is just incredibly difficult to do on its own, the way it's described in the thing in the article.
this because this is a typical discussion about the hackers versus academia and how practical things are and how, ahead of time sometimes academia tries to be versus how impractical some things are. This is a kind of discussion that I really appreciate. And I agree somehow that at this point, many of these attacks might not be practical. But something that I learned in academia is that things move really faster. So right now you're pointing out, oh, there is a possibility, and then in a future months ago, this type of side channel might be in your pocket because, it's always a matter of threat models and so on. So eventually we get a point on these machine learned models will be like in a smart card. So you have this on your pocket. So, performing a close side channel to it will be very, very easy because it's literally on your hand. So let's trust the future.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for going through that, Marcus, and giving us your take on it. So now we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk about all things Marcus and talk about your talk at HOU.SEC.CON. So everybody take a little bit of a break, and we will be right back. And we are back. Hope everybody enjoyed that break. So Marcus, for everybody who watches and listens to our podcast, we always take about 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, however long you want to take to talk about you. So we can spend as much time here as you want, but we kind of like to know what got you interested in doing what you're doing. If you want to talk about what also got you interested in the LLM space and the malware space, but just generally in the cybersecurity and information security space. Give us a rundown about Dr. Botacin.
Yes, definitely. So I was just, a typical nerdy guy born in Brazil that was raised as a kid and then was shy, introverted, as many people are probably listening to us right now. And then I was presented to computers, and then all the magic happened, right? So for a shy person, say, okay, there is an entire world to explore here, and I don't even need to leave my home. So it's pretty interesting to me. And then, of course, this is how I entered computers and computer science and everything. And then I started immediately to fix all computers and repair every computers from all the neighborhood and from all the closest families and so on. And then when I saw, okay, I'm already here programming, and then I think that I'm going to do this as a career because, I like to do that. And there are people interested in paying me for that. There are people that are valuing these kind of things that I simply do for fun, right? So this is the way that all things started. And then I entered like my computer engineering course many years ago. I'm getting old, more than a decade ago right now. But I just liked computers. I started as everyone. I liked games, and then I liked everything. I was really curious by that time. I was like using Linux by a time that nobody knew what was this kind of thing, at least here in my neighborhood. I was simply a nerd. And then in the middle of my undergrad, I found a professor, a research group that they were working with malware. And I said, hey, this is really interesting. I want to do that. I want to know how things work. I always have this curiosity spirit to say, okay, how do things work? And these guys were doing precisely reverse engineering. And then I was like, okay, so you are, unfolding all the things, open the hood of all the things and discovering how it works. I want to do that. I volunteered to be in that lab. I should mention the name of my professor, Paulo Licio, who was my mentor, my undergrad. And then I started doing research over there. And things progressed really, really fast. I entered directly in the malware field. That is the field that I have been working the last 10 years. And it was really a fast start. So by that time, there was the release of the x64-bit system. There was plenty new innovations about the kernel patch protection and lots of things that are coming. And then basically we were developing sandbox by that time. And my mission was like, okay, you have to develop a sandbox for these new x64 systems. And then you have to discover how to do that. And then as an undergrad, I delved in the world of kernel drivers and low-level stuff. And then as an undergrad, I developed my first kernel driver. And then, it seems that by chance, I succeeded in this field. So I published my first paper as an undergrad in a national symposium. And then things becomes a natural path. Like many people have this uncertainty about what to do in the future, what career to pursue. And in my case, it was like a brainless decision. Say, hey, I'm doing this. I like to do this. I have someone giving me the opportunity to do this. And I just took this path, a very straight path into academia. and then I took a master's, and then I took a PhD. And I always have been working with malware research. But of course, over time, we broaden our interests. So among the malware field, we can work in multiple aspects. So I initially started developing sandboxes, and then I delved into much more lower levels. So by that time, there was lots of evasions. We were talking about, sandbox escapes and kind of things. So we say, maybe we needed to monitor at a more fine-grained level, a more transparent level. So there was the age of hypervisors and kind of things. So I delved into hardware antivirus. So from malware, I suddenly became like a hardware designer, developing coprocessor and things for malware detection. And then things progressed. When I entered my PhD program, it was the same problem. Okay, how do we detect malware? But by that point, the bottleneck was not anymore tracing the samples. Tracing the sample was somehow very mature. So the point was, okay, how do we understand the sample? How do we classify the samples? How do we triage the sample? And then from lower level, I end up going very, very high level and say, okay, now the new hype is machine learning. There is this new technique. How do you apply this machine learning for security? And then I applied a lot of machine learning to security, to detect malware. And then this was my career, and then giving consultancy for antivirus companies and playing CTFs as most people do. I usually say that now I'm a full stack malware researcher because I can do everything very broad way from hardware to machine learning in a very narrow field that is malware and malware analysis. And then I have been doing my career since then. I participated in a lot of competitions, for instance, in adversarial machine learning, a competition by Endgame, Microsoft, and other companies, who I had the chance to win this competition along with a colleague, Fabricio. I was very supported, my PhD advisor, who I should name as well, Dr. André Greggio. So André was very supportive for all my activities. And then I worked in a bunch of things. And eventually I end up at A&M. So I have been in Texas for 2.5 years as of right now. And then I'm very happy. So now I have master students, PhD students. I can teach them a little bit about all this, my story, all I have been doing. And they teach me a lot as well because they are doing, very top-notch research. So they know a lot about cybersecurity and machine learning and hardware and everything as well. And I was lucky to have this opportunity to present this talk at the HOU.SEC.CON because it was one of my papers. I think I can enter in details about the paper right now. That's basically, I was doing malware. As I said, I do everything about malware. I think about malware all the time. And then when LLMs emerged a few years ago, I don't know, maybe I'm kind of a weirdo, but the first thing that I thought when I saw an LLM prompt was like, hey, can you write malware for me? And this was literally the first prompt that I typed in the LLM. And by that time, it was not even ChatGPT, it was just the LLM playground. And it was indeed able to produce some malware. And I said, well, maybe we have something here. For a researcher, it was a paradise, right? Say, okay, we have a lot to investigate here. What are the limits? What can happen here? And then the paper started.
Well, that's what I thought, and sorry to interrupt, but that's what I thought was really interesting about, and I mean, we can kind of move into your talk if that's okay. I thought it was interesting how you talked about the difference between what people see as ChatGPT as an application and the LLM behind it. I always, back when I was doing application security, I always made kind of that same argument, or that use that same analogy. It's like websites themselves are apps on your phone are just the front end, and there's a lot that you can build in that to protect the back end. But if you have direct access, which is what you were talking about in your talk, if you have direct access to the model itself, and like you said with that playground, you can make it do a lot of things that the controls aren't in place with the application like a ChatGPT or whatever you're using to front end it.
Yeah, exactly. So this was something that I saw. I mean, I don't claim that my paper was the first attempt to write malware, because probably many people have thought about that before me. And then if you search on the web, there are lots of proposals. But I think something different was that I saw that and say, okay, many of these people are just applying ChatGPT, using it as a tool. Nothing wrong with that, but it's somehow limited. So my question was, is there something more intrinsic to that? Is there something that is more tied to the model? And then I started my investigation. And then I had this opportunity to present at the conference about, okay, there is something here, there is the ChatGPT, there is the application, but there is something under the hood, there is what the model can do. And then I tried to debunk, if I can say that, some claims that we see over there, because what I see over there is a kind of a split between two different positions. There are ones that are too enthusiastic about the LLMs and the power, saying everything is so easy, you just put something there and then there is a malware, there is a code, there is anything that you want. And the other side, there are people that are too skeptical and saying, oh, there is nothing new in AI, it's just something that already exists, and so on and so forth. And of course, as a good scientist, I was trying to find, okay, what's the balance between these two things? And then I think I was able to demonstrate somehow that is somewhere in the middle. There are lots of opportunities, not simply some hype. There is something intrinsically new there. I think it's very powerful. But at the same time, it's not so easy. We have to develop a lot of strategies, not only in prompt engineering, but the way that we test it, the metrics, the interpretation of results, how it's the best use of this model. And I try to deliver a little bit of that in the talk. And the listeners probably can check the talk in the comments. So yeah, please take a look and let me know if you agree with me in this view.
Yeah, and to your point of the examples, right? There, one of the things that jumped out at me that was new that I hadn't seen before was the concept of a generative adversarial network, and you kind of showed that in your chart. I thought that was interesting. Would you mind going into a little bit more about that example of the GAN?
Yeah, for sure. This is something interesting because that's I presented for the first time, firsthand at the HOU.SEC.CON, because the talk was composed of two papers. The first paper I have already published, was my first experience exploring the LLMs. So once again, probably you can find in the links to this episode the links for the paper. Basically, I was doing an exploration, saying, okay, what are the possibilities? What are the limits? And then during this time, since the publication of that first paper, I have been working with the students. I should name the students as well. So I will name the students Bhavan and Manoj, my two great master students. And they have been working improvements to that, because once we demonstrated that, okay, it's possible to generate malware with all the complications, the bottlenecks, the pros and cons, but it's possible. Okay, how do we evolve from that? How do we make this effectively a malware generator? And then we enter in these domains of GANs. So I presented first in at the HOU.SEC.CON, and the paper is still under review. I cannot share this paper yet, but hopefully soon you are going to hear more about that. And the idea was the following. Before the LLMs, the state-of-the-art in generative model were the GANs. So the GANs were very, very popular in academia, much more than they are in the industry and in the news. But when the LLMs came out, well, it was literally an explosion. It was a boom, and everyone was talking about that. And then we thought, okay, there are some pros and cons of every model. There was pros and cons from the previous approach, and there are pros and cons of the new approach. What if we put them together and create some kind of solution that is, well, the best of the two worlds? And, well, basically, we were able to do that. And the result is that we were able to eliminate the prompts, because in the first case, we should have prompts to generate the malware. We should have to describe the malware and say, the malware should do this, the malware should use this function, so on and so forth. So, of course, the coding was automated, but the process was still manual at some extent, at least to describe. But when we have the GANs that are generators, we could use the GANs to generate the prompts for us. And more than that, we could generate prompts that are evasive, in the sense that if we train a GAN to identify the best combinations of functions, the GAN can suggest, well, write a malware this way, using this function. And then the LLMs is a second step of this pipeline that are going to realize that prompt into actual malware. And this malware will be evasive. So this was basically our idea, to couple the two things together, the two technologies. And I think, as far as I know, that we created a new concept that is the iterative malware generation procedure. Because basically, we can generate a malware with LLMs. If this malware is not evasive against a given detector, machine learning, antivirus, or whatever you're trying to detect, you can pass it through the GAN. The GAN is going to modify the prompts in a way that makes it more evasive by removing some functions, adding some functions or dead code, or recombining the functions, say, well, implement this behavior not using this function, but using these combinations of functions that are different, that produce a different bias in the detector. And then the LLM is going to modify the malware that precise way that the GANs are guiding, and then it becomes more evasive. If evasive enough, you are good. If not evasive, do it over and over and over again, iteratively. So this is something that you have shown that basically the more iterations you make, the more evasive, the more antivirus are bypassed. So I think this is interesting to show that, okay, there are limits, but there are also ways to overcome these limits depending on how much effort you want to put. Of course, the more iterations, the more effort, the more power, the more evasion. Then threat modeling again. Does it pay off? Depends on the threat model for your company or organization.
How much do you see some of the hyper automation tools that are getting built out there now being able to help iterate this even faster? Because it sounds like there may be a manual step from your perspective towards the end. Once you get it generated, then you have to run it. But there could be some, do you have automation built into that now? Or are you using some of those tools, or how does that work?
No, I think there's still plenty of space for automation. Not for the evasion identification itself, because this is a process that we already know pretty well, how to stabilize the GANs and the detectors. The GANs are composed by the generators and discriminators, and they achieve some kind of equilibrium. This is a very established theory, so we know how to do that. What I would say that is the bottleneck of this approach as of right now was how to get information, right? So how to know what is malicious, how to know which variations we can perform, especially without breaking the binary. I always give this example. Well, if you have a ransomware, a very, very simple way to avoid detection is to remove all cryptography functions. The GAN might suggest that. The problem is that, well, you destroyed your ransom. It's not a ransom anymore. So you have to take care about how to preserve the functionality. This is something that you should be careful to when doing that. And sometimes we need to implement these cryptography functions in a different way. And we need to have other ways to obtain this information. The model cannot come up with this information by itself. We need to add this information externally. So I think the way that the field of machine learning that's moving very fast is moving right now is towards the agents. So the model is able to not only generate code, but search code in databases and kind of things. So I think a natural way for the future will be to add agents to this process and to add a database of malware reports, malware IOCs, or similar things. So when we need to modify some parts of the malware, we query our database saying, okay, what are the other tricks that we have to implement the same functionality in a completely different manner? So when we will be able to make this integration, I think our approach can evolve. And this is precisely what I have been working right now in the third generation of this attack. So I'll invite our listeners. So if you are interested in working these kind of things, learning more, I have plenty of positions available, open. So yeah, come to work with me.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Hey, there you go. There's jobs, everybody. Jump on it, man. That's great.
Academic jobs. They don't pay very much, but it's pretty fun, I promise.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Absolutely. Research does. Wow. That's a lot to dig into. I mean, I had this conversation with a fellow friend of Sam and ours the other day, and it was specifically about LLMs and medical research, but his argument was that it didn't help that much because it had to already have the data in it. And I said, well, I understand that concept, but the amount of speed that it can add to test the scenarios and to absorb, to your point, all the different IOCs that everybody's already figured out up until this point, it just adds, I mean, it just makes it so much more quicker to do the research where you can come up with answers for the next step, retrain the model based on what you learned, have it take that and then go to the next step. You iterate so much more quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely. Speed and scalability in general is something that these LLMs bring. I always say that, so far I haven't seen LLMs creating a completely new malware or something that we haven't seen before. So, a typical malware analyst have seen all the key components of my malware creator so far. They're pretty known. But the point is that we created these at scale, right? So thousands very, very easily. So this is the real problem that I see. They scale because, you already mentioned the medical domain. And of course, there might be mistakes and so on. And the malware generator as well. The malware generator is not very efficient in the sense that many code produced is wrong. So you have to generate multiple and multiple malware iterations until getting something wrong. But the difference that the medical domain, you cannot make a mistake. Otherwise, well, we have a big problem for the patient. But here for malware creation, the attackers are at a position of advantage, an advantageous position, because, well, they can generate multiple malware samples, and, well, many of them are not going to work, many of them are not going to be evasive, but a lot of them will be. So in 10,000s of samples in our experiments, we have many of them detected, but hundreds of them not detected. And with hundreds of malware samples in the long tail, well, you can cause a significant harm, right? So scale is the thing. So my key message for the defenders is, well, we have to fight the scale. So the only way to fight this scale is to use the same arms. So let's try to develop LLMs for defensive purpose as well. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. Because
you can do this, and you're not killing patients. So yeah, you can just keep going and going and going with it.
No, the opposite. The idea is to defend. So in machine learning, you have this problem of the adversarial attack. So someone can, of course, machine learning in the end is some kind of type of statistics, and it has bias. So there are regions that are less detected. So if you are able to craft a malware sample that fits in that particular region of the model of the neural network, well, it will not be detected. And the problem is, once again, now we can do this at scale. So lots of examples. But we have a defense for that. We have, a painkiller for this patient that is basically retrain the model. So we can create these adversarial examples and perform what we call adversarial retraining. So we retrain the model not only based on the original data set that we collected, but on variations of these data sets. So what I believe and what I try to do in my research is exactly that. We generate a bunch of artificial malware samples and train machine learning models with these adversarial samples. So in the last instance, I say that my research goal is to predict the future. I create a malware sample that does not exist nowadays and train antivirals that are going to predict the malware that are going to exist in the future.
Very cool. Well, you're doing good work, man. We really appreciate it. I really hope, I think Sam agrees with me, that in 2025, you can come present more research. Maybe this paper that you can't talk about now, or can't get into, or can't present to us, maybe you can talk about that in 2025.
Yeah, definitely. It was a great experience. If HOU.SEC calls me, I'll be there for sure.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Well, Marcus, thank you very much for being on. Any last minute thoughts before we get off of here?
Yeah, I would like to thank you once again. Thank everything at the HOU.SEC.CON. It was an amazing experience. And once again, to our listeners, please check the reference. Find me on the internet. And once again, I'm really open to discuss this research-wise, academic-wise or not, if you just want to hang out and talk about all these crazy things. We have positions. Pretty easy to find me, Botacin at tamu.edu. So, yeah, let's chat. Thank you once again.
I can see us all sitting down at the chicken
Dixie
down
chicken.
at the chicken.
Dixie chicken.
Let's go with the sticky tables talking about malware research. Thank you, Marcus. Really appreciate you being on. Sam, anything?
Yeah, there was one last thing that I just and I was waiting now because it was not related specifically to the topic, right? But one of the things I really liked about this presentation was, again, visual learner and a little bit of ADD here, but the at the very top of his presentation, you can see where the topic is headed as he's walking through each slide. You can have the little numbers of 1 out of 250 slides down there, and then I look at that, my eyes glaze over. But when I'm looking up there, I'm like, oh, okay, I see where this is going. And it keeps your thought process on track, which I thought was amazing. I hadn't seen that before. New for me. Maybe it's common practice, but I see a lot of presentations. That was really cool. I just wanted to compliment you for that approach.
Yeah, that's my PhD advisor and that graduate idea. So yeah, kudos to him.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Go check out Marcus's talk. We'll have the link there. We'll have the link to all of the papers that he can talk about right now, and anything he can't come to 2025, where hopefully we'll have Marcus there, and we can all head up to College Station and talk about malware research. Good times.